A massive part of the Assassin's Creed games is being inside of the Animus, a computer simulation of ancient historical worlds. However, the sections in between put us in an interesting memory corridor, showcasing some of the Animus's creepier and more abstract designs. Today we're going to look at all of the loading screens from the first game right up until Mirage, and we'll take a look across the evolution of the series and see how the loading screens have evolved over time throughout the franchise. So the first thing that strikes me about the first memory corridor is the amount of stuff on screen. Later incarnations get very simplistic and very pulled back. The camera here is very far forward. We've got these like clouds and glitches and like memory helixes in between. There's a lot going on to keep your mind interested while you're loading in. I love the way that there's just these little bits of code that just fly in and out as you're walking around. I feel like it really gets across this impression of being inside a computer. Even though these look like real environments, they are actually pieces of code that are literally flying past you as you go. The only thing that sort of detracts from it, I think, is that maybe it feels a bit too real in a strange sense, like having clouds and like simulations and stuff acting out. Altair even has a shadow on the floor, which makes it feel a lot like he's in a real environment, whereas obviously the concept here is that the environment hasn't even loaded in yet. The first game has a very strong set of colours for its colour scheme. You know, each of the cities is defined by its colours, and the Animus itself sort of combines a lot of that into this sort of cold machine feeling. Actually, I just remembered that the Assassin's Creed movie kind of copied this exact colour scheme. Moving on to the second game, we see a noticeable difference, like a massive difference. There is no floor to the Animus, so you're not actually walking on anything. If you look up or down, you feel like you're just walking on nothingness, and I think that conveys the feeling of being in a simulation more. And the whole Animus is given a stark white, a blinding white colour scheme. We're looking at very squared shapes here. We've got lots of line work, there's lots of patterns, and they're always moving around and contorting, and it makes it feel like a bit more ones and zeros, I think, that there's no simulations going on here. You are purely within the coding of the machine. However, there is a little bit of diversity to break it up. We have this sort of memory stream that seems to weave in and out as you're exploring the Animus, and I think it's really cool. Is this one of my favourites? Probably not. I mean, it's a one that we've all seen the most, I'm gonna guess, because Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood use this version of the Animus. Not my favourite. I think they dialed back on a lot of the effects and the actual filters in the Animus, which gives the implication more of a loading screen and less of a simulation. Now, there is a fun alternative version of this in Brotherhood, which I think sticks a lot more to the original game, where you've got those little ones and zeros, those pieces of code, exclusively in the Cristina missions. Now, the Cristina missions are unlocked throughout your progress in the game, and they're sort of memories that have slipped through the cracks of the Animus, and so you literally yourself have to go through the cracks of the Animus to find them, and depicting that as this like horrific red colour scheme with only like a glowing outline of your character, and the ones and zeros like these pieces of code flying past you as you chase after Cristina. There's actually a second person in the Animus that you're chasing after, and it gives you something to actually do apart from just run around. And I think it's fantastic. I think this is much better than the original version we got. You feel like you're somewhere you're not meant to be, and I think that's really cool. And it's a shame that it only appeared for these few missions, because I would have loved to have seen this become the actual loading screen. But moving on, we have the one from Revelations. There's not much difference between the one in Revelations and the one that's in 2 and Brotherhood, aside from the fact that obviously we have like a black colour scheme and this like white horizon on the edge, and it does give the simulation a bit more of a physical presence. You're not just an avatar walking around an empty space. This is like a space that has been generated for you, a bit like how the Animus Island is in the actual game. I don't know what to call it. The crosshatch pattern has been sort of given a little bit more. There are like these little breaks in it, and it feels more like it's incomplete or deconstructing in front of you. It's really cool, and it also brings back a bit of the cloudy colour scheme from the first game, which I've got to assume was an intentional callback. Like, if they wanted to do an Animus deconstructing and like a breakdown of the machine, they could have done a bit more here. I think Creed 3's is synonymous as being the brightest colour scheme. I remember every time this thing came on, my eyes were burned out of my skull. This colour scheme is not just white, it's white. It's like blinding. However, we do get loads of variation here. They go with a more triangular pattern as opposed to square. You actually have a physical floor that you're standing on, which will generate and disappear as you move through it, which I think that's really cool. There's more to look at when you're running around, and it keeps you more entertained. So it works better as a loading screen. And I do like all of the black sort of triangles and all the dots on the edge of the lines and how the line work. It's very modern looking. And also the platform that you're on will sometimes like refract the actual picture of Connor on it, or like whoever's running around. There was also a version of this that was in the Tyranny of King Washington, which was sort of harkening back to Revelations with a darker colour scheme. And also you would have this, I almost want to call it a minigame, where the Apple of Eden would like just appear in front of you and you would go chasing it, which does a good job of thematically tying in what the DLC's objective is, but also it kind of gave you something, like I say, something to do in the Animus. You were looking for this Apple of Eden, and I always wondered if I got it so many times, would something happen? Would I get an achievement, or would I get like a little unlockable, like, you know, it's like catching the golden snitch, you know, in Harry Potter. It was interesting. It never did lead to anything, but that was a cool concept, and I liked it. And the darker colour scheme, I think, fit AC3 a lot better, actually. I wish they'd used that as the main loading screen. The one thing you'll notice about the Liberation one is the colour scheme. I mean, it's now got these vibrant sort of lens flare effects of orange and blue, which these were evocative of the multiplayer menu, which had a similar sort of loading screen, and you can tell to save on resources they've moved it across here. I think the loading screens can have a bit of colour in them, as long as they convey the feeling that you are slipping out of the machine, you're sort of getting a glimpse behind the curtain. The Liberation one does this the least, which kind of makes sense, because this loading screen is from a product Abstergo have like finished and released to the public. This is meant to be, in context, a finished product. I mean, it is innovative and it stands out a lot compared to the rest of the franchise, and I don't know, I could see this incorporating into a better corridor design in future. I really don't like the floor, however. Not a fan of the floor. Next up, we've got the Black Flag one, and this one takes a lot of deviations from the previous ones. This one has the sun. This one has like a physical light at the end of the tunnel that you should be running towards. It also places your character at an off angle. It's such a pet peeve, but I've never liked this. I've never liked the fact that you are like a little bit too much to the left, to where, you know, I like the character being in the centre. I've always liked the character being in the centre. It puts me out of it. I do really, really like the sort of the waves being simulated, like the waves of the ocean being simulated through the dots and the Animus. Like, it feels like it's loading in the world, and that's exactly what it's meant to be. And it does this through these interesting like particle effects, and I think it does feel like a liminal space. It feels like you are not meant to see this part of it, because it takes aspects of the world it's loading in and puts it into the Animus, and that's the first time they really did this. However, I mean, I personally don't think it holds a candle to the Rogue version. The Rogue version takes everything from the previous games. I mean, it's a bit like Rogue itself, really. It takes everything from the previous games and incorporates it into one evergreen design, we'll say. This version of the Animus incorporates the triangles from AC3 that are now like floating around in the space. You've got the clouds from the first game have came back, and you've got like the bit of the base sort of pattern from AC3 as well. You feel like you're walking on these triangles that sort of form and deform as you travel around, and you've even got the waves being conveyed through the crosshatch pattern that was in AC2 and Brotherhood, but this time it's being sort of distorted and warped to form the waves of the ocean. And it's so cool. And not to mention the music. It's like, I've not mentioned the music much because it's pretty much the same thing every time. But in Rogue, first time I played this game, I thought, ooh, there's something different going on here. The vibe that you get from the memory corridor is so chilling and creepy in a way that, and it still feels like you're in like the North Atlantic, or you can feel the coldness of the setting. But there's something about this loading screen, I just absolutely adore it, and I just wish you were in the centre of the screen. That is literally my only pet peeve. I just wish you were in the centre of the screen. Unity kind of forgot to do one. There is an Animus pattern in this game, however, which we may as well go through. A vastly different style entirely. These are solid geometric shapes. They are real, tangible objects that you could see yourself touching or picking up or climbing on. These are like, I don't know if these are meant to represent the buildings of Paris, like the city, or if they're just like memory segments being selected or something. I'm looking at a desktop menu, like a desktop background for Windows or something. This looks like one of the default backgrounds you could have, and I just can't get away with it. The closest thing it actually resembles, if I was going to say that this resembles anything from the previous games, it would be the virtual training sessions from Brotherhood. It kind of resembles that sort of stuff where they were like tangible objects, but they also had like a bit of a gradient, a bit of a abstract pattern to them, but you could tell they were real tangible objects so that you knew what to climb on. Although they sort of had like this code running throughout them that I think looked really good, so you should have done a memory corridor. Syndicates is interesting. I'm not going to say I'm a massive fan of this. I do appreciate that they brought back the memory corridor. That was very nice of them to do. It sort of combines the floating platform thing that we had from 3, but this time it feels like an actual structure, because in the background you have other structures, which makes it feel like you're walking on something that is present throughout the entire loading screen. You've got a little bit of the clouds and the haze, which I do appreciate being brought back. And there's also these like beams and columns of light coming from underneath you, which does keep it fresh and dynamic. I like the idea that the Animus is constantly trying to hide its own existence. It's like, it's trying to convince you the whole time. You are playing. You're not playing a game. You're not playing a game. You're not inside a computer. This is real. You are a real person. You're reliving a real person's memories. And the best way to keep you in that frame of mind is to hide that you're even in an Animus. So when the loading screen looks like it's been made by the Animus on purpose for you to be there, it takes me out of it. I prefer Animus designs that are like, I am not supposed to be here. Origins. Okay. This is where things start to change, and they start to change. Origins is a little bit less egregious because we've got the same kind of wave pattern from Black Flag. In fact, this looks very similar to the Black Flag one, but without a sun. However, I think with Origins, they struck a really good medium, and we're going to see later on how that kind of disappears. But for now, I really love the Origins one because it feels like you're walking across... similar to Black Flag, you're walking across sand dunes that are still being generated. I like that they kept it flat, but they have these like glowing lights underneath the sand to imply like some sort of elevated structure. I do like that. There are these little bits of code flying past, but they're more like speckles and sparks, and like you've got a sort of like you feel like you're walking across the floor again, but this time they've got a reflection of your character underneath, so you feel like you're walking on a pane of glass. I quite like that. There's a lot of shadows and silhouettes and a lot of simulation going on here. It's too clean. That's what I don't like about it. It's too clean. I think it needs to be dirtied up a bit, or you need some kind of haze or filter over the camera. Or I do like how the one thing they do have is that when you're walking, the sort of triangle line effect from AC3 is kind of like pushing around you. It feels like you're pushing through the atmosphere in a way. Like the best way I can describe it, you know in X-Men Days of Future Past, when Quicksilver is running through the moisture That's how it feels in Origins, and I really like that. I think that's a really cool idea. Oh, they didn't even try. Valhalla did not bother at all, I'm gonna say. You don't feel like you're in a simulation here. You don't feel like you're in the Animus. What I feel like is I am on a very pretty lake that has maybe frozen over, and that's why I can walk on it. I can see the stars, I can see the northern lights. It's like it feels like I am in a tangible space. There's no glitches, there's no clouds, there's no illusion at all. You're walking on a very, very defined surface. There is water textures like moving around you. We've gone from being inside a simulation that feels so unstable and like you feel like you could just disconnect from the entire game at any second when you're in those loading screens, to something that feels clean, complete, and like it's fully simulating its own world inside. And I don't know if that's like a commentary on the Animus getting stronger or more modern, but I get the idea. Let's incorporate the time period more into the Animus because that's what it's loading. And I think Black Flag and Rogue had the best sort of balance of that. Like, you should feel uncomfortable. I do think the Animus is meant to be creepy. We don't get this at all, and it's really, and not to mention how long the loading screens are, but I just find it kind of boring. And I don't know if I've mentioned this yet. It's in the previous ones as well. They started to incorporate these like hints and tips and like these little bits of information that just appear on the screen to like, I don't know, give you something to read while you're in the loading screen. And other games have this, and other games do it really well. Like my first thoughts there were to like Fallout 4 or Skyrim, the way they would have a little character model that you could move around, but also you would have some text on screen to explain what you're looking at. That's really good. These hints and tips, I think, are totally like irrelevant to the Animus or anything like that. And it would have been so cool if maybe one of these hints and tips was like a code or a cipher or something you had to solve, or like some sort of mistake in the Animus where it displays the wrong thing, but like on purpose, not in a Ubisoft way. So finally, this brings us on to Assassin's Creed Mirage, the latest one in the franchise. And we've learned nothing at all. Okay, so what do we have here? Physical sand dunes, ghostly apparitions, and we've got the sun rising over the horizon. I mean, we're just not in an Animus at this point, are we? We're just straight up, like, in the desert with people, and it's like a Mirage. Aha, I see what they're doing there. It's like a Mirage out in the desert, like, it's these illusions. Okay, you know what? I'll give it this praise. I like the people being there. If that was like, okay, the crowd simulations are loading in, but they're not loading in properly, that's why they're just silhouettes, that's cool. I could see that being in like Unity. Imagine if Unity had like the simulation of the crowds, but it was like too much to handle. A bit like in the first game where the tutorial just has these blank-faced characters. I like that. I like incorporating that into the loading screen, so it's loading a bit more than just you. It's loading in every kind of asset that's in the world. You know, I will take standing on a geometric platform over being in the world already. Why do we need a loading screen if the sand is already perfectly generated, if the swooshing of the sand is already there? Like, don't get me wrong, on a technical level, it's beautiful. Like, as an artistic standpoint, the loading screen here, I think, looks gorgeous compared to Valhalla's. I thought Valhalla's looked a bit muddy and bleh. This is really aesthetically pleasing, and when you then tell me this is the Animus, it's just not, is it? Where's the iconography being carried across? Where's the simulation feel? Where's the glitches? Where's the code? Where's the shapes? Where's everything that makes it resemble a computer? So overall, wrapping up my thoughts on these Animus loading screens, what we've had is a slow transition from being inside a computer, from being inside a simulation that is loading in the memories of your ancestors, into straight up creating an illusion of that world. We've lost a lot of the technical elements and replaced them with more simulations and more practical sort of stuff. Let's put it straight. It's a fantasy game that is trying to ignore the modern day elements entirely. That's what's happening here. Ubisoft, as they have moved the Assassin's Creed franchise forward, I think have been very burdened by the fact that they are games within games. They've tried to distance themselves from that as much as possible, to the point where even Mirage just doesn't have a modern day, so it has no need to say you're in the Animus. I mean, for all we know, Mirage doesn't even take place in the Animus. It's just a straight-up memory, which could be why Basim remembers it the way he does. But it's never, I don't think it's conveyed that way, and look, you're comparing it to every other game in the series. What I'm hoping for with the next title, with Assassin's Creed Red, or Shadows, whatever they end up calling it, is that they remember that they're inside the Animus. Because look, okay, I get it. It's got convoluted, it's been executed terribly since 2013. But it's still an element of these games. It still needs to be there. I wouldn't... Look at how heavily the movie depended on the modern day, because it understood that that is the concept of Assassin's Creed. The thing that makes Assassin's Creed interesting is not the stabby bloke, it's the fact that you are watching the memories of a stabby bloke, and you have to stay on course with what happened. No matter how bad or terrible the things were, you have to stick the journey out. I just want it to feel like an Animus. That's it. So what do you think of the loading screens? There's definitely a discussion to be had here, so do let me know down below what your favourite loading screen looks like, because we've got so much variety, there's so much to depend on here. What's your favourite element of a loading screen, and what do you want to see in the future of this franchise? Let me know down below. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.